Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Recently, Indian cinema lost one of its bold, brave and sensitive filmmaker, Rituparno Ghosh. To talk about what he and his films meant to cinephiles, filmmakers and critics, we have with us Kaushik Bhowmik from Osian Cinefan Film Festival. Hi Kaushik.
Hello, hi.
What does Rituparno's death mean to Indian cinema and particularly Bengali cinema?
Well, I mean, Cinefan as a festival has been connected with Rituparno's career from a very early on period, and in fact, in some ways, it's very sad because Cinefan, started off promoting a new kind of cinema in India with its focus on Asian cinema. And in some ways, the kind of films that Rituparno was making and the kind of a new cinema for a new generation and a new film festival for that generation kind of idea that Cinefan had, I think they came together very well, and Rituparno was very warm and positive towards Cinefan. A lot of his films were shown. He used to come to the festival quite frequently. So for us, it is almost like losing a very long-standing friend and somebody with whom our identity is related in a very integral way for the manner in which we focus on our films, the kind of films we show, and the kind of films that he made. There was a link. I think that kind of cinema has, there are not that many filmmakers in India who do make that kind of cinema, which is very daring and kind of pushes the envelope in terms of social taboos and issues. And it's a big loss. I mean, and for Bengali cinema, it's a huge loss. I mean, in some ways, for a long time, he was Bengali cinema. I mean, there was nobody else. And more than that, a huge cultural voice has gone out from Bengali culture, not just cinema.
From Hirer Angthi to Unishe April and to Chitrangada, how do you see his journey as a director?
I recently examined an MPhil dissertation at the Arts and Aesthetics Department in JNU on Rituparno. This is like a full dissertation on him. It's a very fine dissertation. But while reading it, I suddenly realized, all the film when you read about something, then you remember the films and you kind of have an overview of all the films when you read a dissertation. And what comes through is that Rituparno, throughout his career, never ever made a film just about something out there. There was always one character or part of him always there in every film. And he was experimenting, I think, throughout. All his films are about an experimentation about himself, his biography, his gender, about gender in general in society, culture, cinema. So I think in some ways it was like a detective. His entire career was like a detective film being made. Like, oh, now I am hiding behind this character, then I am hiding behind that character. Let me see how it looks from this point of view. So I think it was a evolutionary process in which there are at least three phases which are very clear. There is one which is the social phase, where he makes films about familial relationships or couples relationships or things like that, which have always something sexual about them. There is a breakdown of some relationship or something like that. Then there is historical films, mainly Tagorean. And then his last phase, when he kind of accepted his third sex status and came out and started acting, and then made Chitrangada, which closed our festival last year. So I think it has been a gradual emergence. One can see all the films as a rehearsal towards some kind of an emergence and an experimentation with the self. I would like to see his career in those terms.
Rituparno believed that Satyajit Ray is his mentor, and he said that even Unishe April was inspired by Ray's Jolosha Ghor. How much Ray you see in Rituparno's films?
Well, there is a lot, but there is a lot more. There is, there was this whole controversy when Unishe April was released that it resembled not Ray's film but Bergman's Autumn Sonata. And Rituparno at that point said, I had not even seen Autumn Sonata, and yet there is a Bergmanesque element. His films are far more verbose than Ray's films. There's far more speech and talk. It's almost like television. One has to remember that Rituparno has a close relationship with television, which is only visible in Ray's last films, the last 3 films. So yes, I mean there is Ray, but there's, I think Tagore is far more important in his films than Ray, and there is Bergman, and there is of course Almodovar, and that part has also to be seen, that there's a certain kind of relationship with other LGBT filmmakers across the world, which is also there. But yes, Ray is important.
As you were saying, exploring relationships and its dynamics was an integral part of Rituparno's films and his treatment. Does this make him stand out from his contemporaries?
Well, I mean, if you think, as I said, that Rituparno himself came at a time when Bengali cinema was in a very bad shape. If you have to compare him with his contemporaries, then of course he stands out in a completely different way. But over time, what he did fitted in with Bengali cinema and in other parts of Indian cinema as well, where issues of relationships and things like that came back into focus after the 1970s and 80s, when art house cinema used to focus on relationships. Something of that kind started to come back. Buddhadeb Dasgupta has always made relationship oriented films towards the latter part of his career. But I think what really made him stand out was his scripts and his eye for detail, and the manner in which he scripted out and his obsessive detailing of nuances of personalities. That I think was very, sometimes it became too heavy, sometimes too much, but in certain films like Ashok, and then even in Urisha April, there are a few other films. Even Shopcharita Kalpanik is a very interesting film, where his ability to complexify a character, I think there he was quite unique, because he was a literary person. I mean, he was very novelistic in his approach. So he had that capacity to nuance things, and because he also wanted to challenge, so he would show the hidden dimensions of a person's personality. So that kind of detailing and making things complex, I think he does stand out amongst his contemporaries in a very, very significant way. Yeah.
To what extent Ghosh inspired his contemporaries and aspiring filmmakers?
Oh, I mean, this dissertation that I examined is, in fact, it coins a very interesting term called the Rituparno-esque, which means that it's not just Rituparno, but a lifestyle or a style of being, or a style of making films, or an aesthetic style, and the dissertation very rightly goes on to argue that he has influenced almost, every now there is no distinction between parallel and mainstream, but a huge number of filmmakers who have come up in the last, from the 2000s onwards, who have very clearly, taken on his idiom, dissected the middle class life, contemporary middle class life, with the same kind of aesthetic values, a certain kind of softness, Tagorean values and things like that.
In Bengali cinema?
In Bengali cinema, yes. I mean, recently, he is also, earlier he was this marginal genius, who was on his own. But recently he had started interacting with directors like Kaushik Ganguly and people like that, whose film he acted, Arekti Preme Golpo. And then he was collaborating with Anjan Dotto as well. So he was also opening up, like Byomkesh is another way of opening up to a new kind of collaboration with a new generation. I think he was beginning to reinvent himself, because it's a very, very difficult journey. I mean, that isolation of a certain kind of personality and a public figure, not being able to express everything about his life at a certain point in time in his career, I think that made him do certain things, made him a certain kind of personality, a recluse, and all these kinds of accusations that he has sycophants and things like that. But I don't think that was the case. I mean, but over the years he has come out more and more and collaborated with people And so his influences like Kaushik Ganguly's Director Prema Gopal are not really one of the most sensitive films on LGBT issues ever made. I mean, in this country for sure. And it's so much him, Rituparno, as much as Kaushik Ganguly, who's always been very interested in these gender issues in a very interesting way. So, a very interesting phase was opening up with his with this new phase of Rituparnos. Yes, I mean, but his influence on Bengali cinema is, you can't question that. Yeah.
Popular culture has many a times changed the stereotypical thinking of the masses about certain taboos of the society. Uh, Rituparno's take on LGBT issues was the most sensitive. So, how big was his voice for the LGBT community?
I think Rituparno's position increasingly became more vocal, and he came out more vocally about LGBT issues. But there are a number of complications here. But what for working at Cinefan, something that was really important, and I think something that people will not immediately register, but because we work in a film festival, we have the advantage of having a more kind of comparative framework. Rituparno was coming up in India with a certain kind of sensitivity to these issues, and undoubtedly his depiction of these issues is been the most sensitive. I mean, there is nobody who comes close. Everything else is stereotypical. Anything that Bollywood does or Bombay does is very stereotypical. But what Rituparno does is there's a certain sensitivity. And in that, I think he was, for us, it was like a journey. You know, we in Cinefan had always, right from the beginning, promoted LGBT cinema. Philippines was a very big space of LGBT cinema. But in recent world cinema, two directors who come readily to mind, Chai Ming Liang and Apichat from Taiwan, and Apichatpong Weerasethukur from Thailand, they are also gay filmmakers in the sense that they are not LGBT filmmakers or anything, but there is a lot of gayness in the cinema, and there are a lot of gay characters in their films. And so, for me, it would be that Rituparno was coming up as, you know, as a part of an Asiatic film movement, cutting across many directors. I'm just mentioning two directors, but there are many directors. Singapore, in Indonesia, in Philippines. I think that's what was interesting. That somehow Rituparno, when he invokes the Vaishnav tradition and things like that, which in some ways he invokes in order to say that for him it's easier to understand androgyny, and for him it's easier to understand the position of third sex. I think that's something that is very prevalent from Bengal onwards eastwards, you know, where bodies, men and women's bodies, are not so distinguishable, where cultures are not so gendered so easily. They are androgynous cultures like China or Japan or Southeast Asia. That was interesting. That I think was interesting, and I think later on, I think there was too little gap between his coming out, being vocal about accepting a third sex status for himself, and his death. But I think there was some controversy brewing, that the LGBT community felt betrayed by this easy acceptance on his part of the third sex kind of model, and they felt that, you know, he would then distance himself away from, you know, making an issue of being gay or not. He said that it really doesn't matter. I am just happy to be a third sex person. I don't want to be defined as heterosexual or homosexual or whatever. So, I think there was some controversy happening on that, but that just shows how sensitive he was in terms. I mean, from the film world, undoubtedly he was the most important voice.
Do you think in the second half of his career he developed a certain fascination for Bollywood and he made self-indulgent films?
Without falling into stereotypes, you know, I mean, there is a part of gay culture which is starstruck. You know, one of the biggest theorizers of stardom in world cinema theory is also one of the most leading theorists of gay cinema, Richard Dyer. You know, so in some ways one can say that there is a certain part of Rituparno himself was a very flamboyant man. he was sartorially very flamboyant. He liked being a star himself. I think that made him look towards Bollywood. He wanted to, that as he became a star, he wanted to play on a bigger canvas. Now, this can be a creative thing, maybe Bengal was not offering him that big canvas to play on. And this is not only Rituparno who does this. People who do well in Taiwanese or Hong Kong cinema go off to Hollywood to make films, because once you become a director, you become more ambitious and you need a bigger stage to play on. I think that was more the case. But there is, of course, also Rituparno, the gay director, being fascinated with stardom as such. Interestingly, he once told me Chokerbali was very important for him, because he could, through the beauty of Aishwarya and her femininity and her use of jewelry and saris and all that, he came to terms with a certain side of himself. So, you can very clearly see in Arikti Premer Golpo, when he does the historical role or when he dresses up as Chitangada with jewels, he is definitely referring back to Chokerbali and Aishwarya Rai. So, it is very complex. There are many dimensions here. There is the more generic stereotypical vision of the gay director, fascinated with stardom. Then there is himself as a star wanting to do something on a bigger scale, Bollywood affording him that. And then there is this personal angle, where through the actresses he is coming to terms with his own femininity and saying, okay, it is fine for me to dress up as a woman and wear jewelry and so on and so forth. So, one can say that that is self-indulgent, but he is an artist and he can do anything. Self-indulgent is a very difficult term to use with respect to artists. Artists are always self-indulgent. There is never a moment when an artist is not self-indulgent. Sometimes the artist's art might be dialoguing with society and the self-indulgence looks less, but it is there. Sometimes the artist says, Maro goli society ko, I will do what I want to do. I want to do things on my terms. Like, say for example, D.W. Griffith making Intolerance after Birth of a Nation. It is a great film to watch now, but in those days people use exactly the same terms. Self-indulgent, too big, too much money spent, the vision is too epic, too dreamy. But again, Griffith says, okay, now I have made Birth of a Nation, I have the whole system in my hand, I have worked so hard, I have been making films according to the system, now I have been given the creative freedom, I have been given the budget, now let me do what I want to do. Now, the moment the artist says what I want to do, even however great the film is, it is contextual. In that period it looks self-indulgent, today it looks like a masterpiece, So, there is an element, yeah. I mean, he lost. I think he became too confused with so many issues going on in his life. His personal issues. I think that was the more important thing. I think more than anything else, it was the confusion about, himself. I think his own confusions were coming out, and his films were suffering because of that. And he, I think, lost interest in making films for a few years in between. But then now look at how he comes out in the last 3-4 years of his career. He resolves it. He resolves his personal crisis. He resolves what he wants to do with cinema and was beginning to make, a new phase of his cinema. That was that, and that's sad bit that it just gets cut off the moment things get interesting, when resolutions have happened, and So that's why it's very premature to judge things in that sense. But a very, very clever, intelligent, sensitive mediator of culture, cinema and history has been lost. That's the thing. I mean, he had that platform of cinema to express these things, reach out to the masses, and had the stature to actually start a debate. I mean, you have to be famous. Sometimes famous people help. They can project things, project issues into the masses which ordinary people like you and me can't. And that was also something. It takes a long time to get that place where masses begin to accept somebody who is transgressive, but they accept him because he is intelligent, clever, and he has qualities. that space takes a long time to create. We who work in the cultural field know that that space will not come back very soon. That kind of a space where stardom and, you know, slightly transgressive social values and a good cultural debate about certain issues can happen at that level of, you know, engagement with society and complexity. That will take some time, and that's a big loss. That's a huge loss. It takes a long time to get a personality like Rituparno.
Hopefully, Rituparno's last film, Satyan Veshi, will be released soon. So, you're looking forward to it?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, it's again, obviously, he has taken on whatever role he's playing in that film for a certain reason. So, I think any film that we would have acted in and decided to act in this phase would be interesting, because he would always be making a comment on something or the other, which would be about gender, obviously, and I'm really looking forward to what he does in that film and how that film looks with him there, because you don't associate Rituparno with a Bhowmikesh film, but then he's versatile. He can imagine himself being there, and he'll do that. In any case, that film has quite a offbeat casting, like, you know, even Bhowmikesh's director, Kahani's director, is acting as Bhowmikesh. So it's, I think,
Sujoy Ghosh.
Sujoy Ghosh. So I guess the film as such will be interesting to watch. So definitely looking forward to it. Yes.
So, we will have definitely much more to talk about Rituparno after the film get released. Thank you so much, Kaushik.
Thanks very much. Thanks.